Welcome and thanks for attending today's session on impact investing and small business capitalization in particular. Let me introduce myself. I'm Leslie Munger, Funds and Program Officer here at the Adirondack Foundation. Joining me today from the team is Lori Bellingham, our Vice President of Community Impact. Lori will be facilitating our discussion. A few words about Adirondack Foundation and our Community Voices series before we get started. As many of you know, Adirondack Foundation helps to connect generous donors with causes they care about in the places they love. We unite people, institutions, and resources to produce lasting results. We have relationships with thousands of generous donors, hundreds of local organizations, and countless community partners that give us unique insight and perspective on the challenges and opportunities our communities face. Since our founding in 1997, we've distributed more than $70 million in grants and scholarships back into the community. Annually, the Foundation seeks unrestricted funds for flexible grant making to meet current and systemic needs, primarily through our Generous Acts program. Through this program and in partnership with fund holders who grant alongside us, we support regional nonprofits with more than $960,000 in grants this spring alone. We also work with fund holders to support our impact areas by inviting them to co-give or co-fund alongside us to support applicants to our Generous Acts grant program.
What do you think? You want to run with him?
We might need to just remind folks to mute if you don't mind.
Our work is guided by what we call our Strong Community Framework, which consists of 5 full community impact areas: basic needs, educational pathways, economic vitality, arts and culture, and environment. We encourage you to take a look at the full framework on our website, and we'll have someone drop that link in the chat for those who are interested. Our Community Voices event today is part of the Foundation's effort to share important community issues, approaches to addressing them, as well as general trends in philanthropy. Today's topic falls under our Economic Vitality priority area. This priority area is guided by the vision that thriving communities provide equitable and just economic opportunity, attract and retain residents and businesses, and inspire civic engagement. This session will focus on nonprofit organizations who help support and grow the small businesses in our region by providing access to capital and the technical assistance necessary for many of our small business owners. And now I'll pass it to Lori to get our discussion started.
Great. A bunch, Leslie. And I think I saw a couple of other team members on there. When we're back in the Hollywood Squares, you'll see Callie and Matt and Jen, I think, are all on here. So, but thank you and welcome to everybody who's joining us this afternoon. I want to get our discussion going quickly, but if you'll allow me to take just a brief minute to explain the Foundation's role in our topic of small business capitalization. So for us, it's through place-based investment. Through research, conversation, and convening around the challenges to thrive economically as a community, we learned that business ownership, home ownership, and access to capital are vital to building generational wealth. We also know that attainable housing attracts and retains workers, keeping those businesses and communities strong. So these types of projects, business capitalization, home housing development, these types of projects have been beyond the Foundation's reach. But as our assets grew to more than 80 million, we realized rather than investing our portfolio only in stocks and bonds, we could put a portion of it into our own backyard. So the practice known as place-based impact investing enables us to back projects that generate positive social impact, as well as a modest financial return. While we usually provide grants, these investments are loans, and they're repaid so that we're able to use that capital to reinvest in other projects. To date, we've worked with area nonprofit financial institutions, including the 2 that we'll hear from today, to make just over 1.4 million available for loans to small businesses, workforce housing projects, and vehicle loan programs. So why small business capitalization? A 2016 report from the Office of the New York Comptroller described how most of the Adirondack region's small businesses employ fewer than 20 workers. We're all probably aware of that. And that businesses with fewer than 100 employees are responsible for well over half of all business payrolls and receipts in the North Country region. Small businesses, we know this, are the foundation of our regional economy. They create vibrancy in our communities, they provide necessary services, offer hubs for innovation, and employ our residents. In 2021, the Foundation's trustees committed to investing up to 2% of Foundation assets locally. We sought investments that maximize impact on the local economy and our residents, and it became clear that our region's small businesses often struggle to access capital. We learned that community banks were unable to service all of the legitimate demand for small business borrowing, and in particular, business expansion and intergenerational transfer of businesses is often thwarted by the business owner's lack of financial knowledge and collateral. So the community leaders who've joined us today are Adirondack Regional Federal Credit Union, Adirondack Economic Development Corp, or you may know them as AEDC, Adirondack North Country Association, who you know as ANCA, and some provide capital to our region's businesses and can be referred to as mission-based lenders. They'll share what that means, and all offer the critical technical assistance I just mentioned. We're also extremely pleased to be joined by new business owners, Amanda and Ryan Ragland from the Town Store at Spruce Lake. We'll start our conversation with presentations from each organization. Then we'll take 20 minutes or so for your questions and conversation. So you're welcome to put them in the chat now. We'll make sure they get asked. I'll actually mention to you that I'm getting ready to introduce Victoria, Steve Garneau, Amanda, and Ryan from the AEDC. And I'll note that Amanda and Ryan have a business to run. So they're going to be part of this conversation, this piece of the conversation, but they're going to head back to work following this conversation with the AEDC. So please do put your questions in the chat for Amanda and Ryan during this part, and we'll make sure that they have an opportunity to answer those before they head back to work. So let me just introduce the folks from all associated with the AEDC. So Victoria, I don't know, you might wave. Victoria Zinzer-Dooley has been executive director at the AEDC in Saranac Lake since 2019. She's held leadership positions in economic development, planning, higher ed, and research, both in the North Country and Southern Florida for more than 20 years. She serves on the New York State Regional Economic Development Council as its workforce development and grant review committees, and in board or leadership positions in the New York Economic Development Coalition, UVM Health Network, and CVPH boards, amongst other things. I'll stop there. Steve Garneau, if you'll wave, Steve, is also with AEDC, and he brings 20 years of commercial lending experience to his role as their loan program manager. He works directly with our region's businesses, provides one-on-one counseling, maintains relationships, and co-presents financial related course content in AEDC training events. And then last but absolutely not least, Ryan and Amanda Ragland, who own the Town Store, which is a community institution established in Spruce Lake in 1881 and opened under their ownership in mid-May. So welcome to all of you. Thank you so much. And Victoria, I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you so much, Lori. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about our organization, and then I'm going to really kick it over to the important folks here to talk a lot more, which are Steve Garneau, our loan program manager on our team, and then Amanda and Ryan today. So what they have to say is a lot more interesting than me, but just really quickly about our organization. AEDC is a 501c3 nonprofit. We've been doing economic development across the greater North Country, the 14 counties that you can see in front of you in the green. So we're the greater Adirondack North Country region of New York State, where we serve small business needs. So we've been in existence since 1976. So we're coming up on 50 years. So pretty long history across the region. And the work that we've done in economic development has varied a little bit in terms of scope, but largely our very core focus has always been and is on small businesses. So that's the real piece that we do in partnership with a lot of the other economic development organizations and the public sector across the region. So our big piece of that is to help out new startup businesses and then to help the existing small businesses grow. So we do that in a focus to, in particular, Main Street businesses and disadvantaged entrepreneurs or business owners. And that's our piece that we provide a lot across the whole spectrum for whatever their needs are. So our office is headquartered in Saranac Lake, and we have a real small office also in Saratoga Springs, but we do serve that whole 14 county region. Next slide, please. So the work that we do is really across 3 areas in serving small business. The biggest piece probably for us is lending. We do small business lending, and we have a number of loan funds that we're able to employ for capital access for startup businesses and existing very small businesses when they can't meet that need elsewhere. We'll talk some more about that. Steve will talk quite a bit more about that. But I think a piece that we provide that perhaps is less well known across the region is the technical assistance that accompanies our lending and just in general for serving our entrepreneurs. So Steve will also talk quite a bit more about this, but this means that we're working with them to develop their business plans. We're helping entrepreneurs in their startups to what do they really need to get together to be able to have access to capital and that piece of it. So the technical assistance is a huge piece of what we do. And then finally rounding that out, we provide business training. And by that, I mean, in a more of a group setting, we have at least one annual entrepreneur course, typically in the fall, that we have a cohort of would-be entrepreneurs that come through and work together as a team and develop their business plans, working with us side by side. And then we're able to do regularly training about once a month on a variety of topics to serve small businesses. And then all of those activities are really at no cost. So I threw up a couple of partnerships that we have there. I won't get into a lot of that detail for sake of time and to get the more interesting things. But I think it is important to notice that we are a community development financial institution designated by the U.S. Department of the Treasury. That is a unique designation. And essentially it means that we're supported and able to focus on serving economically and socially disadvantaged clients. And in that, so a lot of the folks across are very small businesses in the region. We also work in a couple of partnerships with Empire State Development, particularly their Entrepreneurship Assistance Center program. We are one of the 23 designated in New York State. And we're an SBA, Small Business Administration micro lender. So we access some of their funds. We borrow money from SBA as one of our core loan sources. Next slide, please. So I'm going to kick this over to Steve. You know, we have our resources up there and happy to talk a lot more about the organization another time. But Steve Garneau is our 10-year with AEDC loan program manager, and he does a fantastic job of hitting all of this, helping people access capital, and perhaps more importantly, providing them the technical assistance and resources to do that with some support of our other teams. So Steve, may I pass it over to you?
Sure. Thank you very much, Victoria. Well, I'm really excited to be here, and I'm glad everyone else could join us. Big shout out and thank you to Lori Bellingham and all of the other staff at Adirondack Foundation. Much of what we do today, we can't do without you. So thank you for being a partner with us. As Victoria had indicated before, AEDC is a private nonprofit organization. You know, our areas of business and our primary focus is to assist those people of low to moderate incomes, otherwise disadvantaged women and minorities. These are typically people that have been left out, if you would, of the conventional business lending environment. And hence, that's the place where we live. Just want to talk a little bit about the types of technical assistance that we do. Technical assistance really can mean a lot of different things to lots of different people. I will say that before we even provide any type of technical assistance, our initial introductions with our clients usually revolve around a conversation. That conversation talks about a lot of different subjects come up. I like to know who they are, what they want to do, what are their goals and aspirations, and what do they need. For many people that come to us, it really does start out with an idea. Many people will say, hey, I really love German food. I want to start a German restaurant or something to that effect. So where people come from is very, very varied. Some people only have an idea. Some people are transitioning into an established business. So the technical assistance that we provide really is a very broad subject, and I really can't cover that here. But I would like to say that in meeting the needs of people, we do our very best to meet them where they are. Everybody in life is much more than a name, much more than a social security number. We're a composite of all our life experiences, our work experiences, some good, some bad. We all have dreams and aspirations, and it's really good for us to understand that, because we perceive success as being able to help our clients fulfill their dreams, their objectives, their goals. Now, oftentimes that's very varied. Sometimes it takes a long time. Sometimes it doesn't. The assistance can, range from referring a client to a conventional lender that has a strong appetite for lending in a specific industry. It could be reaching out to our other financial provider organizations, like the credit union in Tupper Lake, or other non-traditional funders, or even a host of conventional lenders. You might know them as Adirondack Bank, Community Bank, Glens Falls National Bank, those kinds of things. However, it really is important to understand that each of those conventional lenders have their own predetermined matrix for approving the types of loans that they want to do. We're a little bit different in that we try to do the loans that our clients want us to do. Oftentimes, that's a very, very challenging task. When we meet people where they are, that means we accept them as they are in the financial position that they are in. Oftentimes, it's very characteristic, or it's typical for people of low to moderate incomes, women, minorities, those that are otherwise disadvantaged, to have very limited capital to invest in a business. They may not have great credit scores, and they may not be asset rich or own their own home even. So they have a lot of obstacles that need to be mitigated, overcome, or addressed. Oftentimes, those types of conditions that our typical client is involved with, those are cause for denial, rejection by a conventional lender. Now, we appreciate the role that all banks play, our conventional lenders. We do not compete with them. We consider them our partners. So, a lot of these banks brings referrals to us. So that being said, we get clients from all walks of life, from every area in our communities possible. And we essentially have a conversation, evaluate where they are, and we help them build a plan to accomplish what they want with them. That plan may be to purchase a business, it might be to start a business, and it might be just to expand an existing business. As you can imagine, there's lots of different activities that go on in a business. And as a business owner, you really need to wear like many, many hats. But that being said, many people that have not been exposed to business don't have that experience of wearing those various hats. AEDC is unique in that we're very familiar with our rural areas. We're very familiar with our economies. We're up to date in what is happening locally and regionally. And, you know, we know who the contacts for resources are. So we can easily plug them into the resource that best meets their needs, or enable contacts with other organizations that may have a strong appetite for lending in their particular industry, or are focused as we are as a mission-based lender. So we have lots of connections, and we essentially help facilitate those connections for our clients. Other types of technical assistance that we do may be helping them produce forward-looking financial statements to help them complement their business plan, or engage in some type of a planning event for them, whether that's for events or a marketing campaign, or whatever the case may be. I've invited Ryan and Amanda Ragland here because I think that they have a really interesting story to tell. Now, they may not be a typical client that AEDC is accustomed to seeing. It's a woman-owned business, but I wouldn't want to say that they're disadvantaged. They're both very educated. They do have assets, and they did have capital to invest in their business. So although not typical, there were some challenges. One of those notably was the presence of a significant component of goodwill in the transfer of the business. Goodwill is an intangible asset. It's not something that's easily or collateralized, or something that a local lender, conventional lender, would consider having value, or a lot of value. So that was one obstacle in getting a conventional lender to get involved in the project. But it's a great story, and I'm going to let Ryan and Amanda tell that story. Please feel free to send me any questions during this dialogue. Put your messages in the chat, and I will be sure to read those and follow up on you. If I may, I'd like to turn this over to Ryan and Amanda Ragland of the Town Store in Schroon Lake. Amanda, Ryan, would you mind sharing your experience in your approach to finding a lender?
Sure. So just to give you guys some background, as far as what our business looked like and kind of what brought us here. If you're familiar, the Town Store is kind of a staple of the Schroon Lake community. It's been there for a number of years at this point. And when we were interested in purchasing the business, it included the business proper and also the building that the business was running. So for us, maybe naively coming into this, as Steve mentioned, we were fairly established in our careers at that point. We had some capital to be able to kind of do things. And we assumed, erroneously that because we had assets and we had decent credit scores, that when we went to conventional lenders, that it was going to be a pretty straightforward process for us. And we were kind of surprised to find out, that a bank like Chase Bank wasn't doing the type of business loan that we were looking for, because of the complexity of the business and the building and everything that was kind of associated for that. So our next, choice obviously was to look a little bit more local, which is kind of what started us down the path that eventually led us to Steve. And a similar, I guess, sort of frustration in that, lending seemed to be easier if you were already a business that was, up and running, but a little bit harder if you were, somebody who was looking to, even in our case, acquire a business. So what Steve mentioned in terms of technical support, once we got kind of pushed into his direction, he was able to recommend someone to us, to help with generating a business plan, which became important throughout the process. And, none of that came out of pocket, from us in terms of cost. So the resource there was invaluable. As Steve mentioned too, once we kind of got down to the nuts and bolts of actually acquiring the business, we did have a significant amount of goodwill, which, for a traditional bank, they typically don't want to have anything to do with that, and understandably so. So Steve was able to help us out with that, and Steve was also able to partner us with another local organization, which ultimately allowed us to seal the deal. So that's kind of a quick overview and synopsis of how everything kind of shook out. I don't know if you have anything I left out or forgot, or
No, that was really the summary of our roadmap.
I don't know if that made any sense, but okay.
Yep.
Anybody have any questions? Or
Welcome to Schroon Lake. How's it coming so far?
that's great so far. I mean, we couldn't have asked for just a more beautiful community to become a part of. Everybody at a local level has just been so supportive, and just so wonderful and encouraging us and coming in and patronizing the business. And it's been great. So
It's great to have you here.
thank you.
Well, Ryan and Amanda, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And again, if anyone has any questions, please pop those into the chat box and we will ensure that those questions are answered. So yeah, great. Thanks, Ryan and Amanda. Really appreciate that. There's a couple elements there that I just want to expound upon. There was a significant element of goodwill. The goodwill amounted to approximately 1/3 of the value of the entire project, which was quite significant. And also I want to point out that, despite the advantages that Ryan and Amanda had, they're both college educated. They're both currently working. Amanda is able to keep her currently full-time job because it permits remote work. I think both of the principals of the business, Ryan and Amanda, both have exceptional knowledge, skills, and abilities in this particular industry. It's also important to note the business that they were buying. It was an ongoing business. It was operating as a going concern. It had been in operation in Schroon Lake for over 100 years. This is a downtown anchor store. So ADC quickly and early on recognized the importance of keeping this business open and alive. We understand what vacant storefronts mean for a downtown, and Schroon Lake is no different. It's very important to keep these businesses open and to preserve the jobs that this existing business supported. There were 2 longtime employees, I believe probably 30 years experience between the 2, and those people maintained and kept their jobs, which I think is very, very important. So that being said, we're not only looking at the needs of the individual, but we also take into account the relevance of the business in the community, because we understand that businesses are just, they're a catalyst for lively, vibrant communities. So that being said, questions?
Yeah. We have one in the chat asking Ryan and Amanda about employees. So have you had trouble hiring, challenges with housing, either yourself or your employees along the way?
Great question. We were really fortunate. We had 3 employees last year. The previous owner had 3 employees, and all 3 of them decided to stay on with the new ownership. And as you've mentioned, 2 of them have combined have been here for 30 years. So it's been so vital. And I think, honestly, coming in and not really thinking about that next step of owning this building and owning this business, that we got maybe 1 2 speed dates with the previous owner on. Having that employee who has been here, Lisa, she is our rock. She's been here for 19 years. She knows this building inside out. She knows the business and how things are run. And that has been such an immense help for us starting a new business too. So something that we didn't even really foresee and has just been phenomenal. In regards to our own housing, we were very fortunate. We bought a secondary home on Paradox, which is about 10 minutes away from downtown Scroon. About 3 years ago before the bubble of the market. And so we have moved our lives here and we are now here full time in that home. So what was great, and again, our luck in this situation is the ability to be able to have an existing home as the market has continued to, you know, been an interesting one in the community regarding housing, especially, you know, becoming more of a vacation property, you know, rental and the market, you know, continuing to increase here. So that's our story regarding the real estate market for ourselves.
So an additional follow-on to that is what is a question about whether you had to renovate or do a lot of work to the building and the store before you were able to reopen.
Yeah, so we took the keys in April and we opened about 3 or 4 weeks later. So we've had minimal time to be able to really dive into the building. We've really focused on just re-merchandising and reinvesting in the inventory and getting ourselves open for the season, because if we're closed, we're not making any money. So that was our number one for this year. The building is very old. And so Ryan is very handy, thank goodness. We have a lot of plans for the future. And, you know, that I think is going to be our next step in really sitting down from a financial standpoint to determine, you know, how do we continue to honor this building, but also improve, you know, the all aspects, the exterior, the interior. The building itself is 11,000 square feet. The retail space itself is 4,500 of that. There is additional potential for us to have a secondary business within this building, but it would require additional capital and construction and investment in order to make that happen. So those are some of the things that we will be thinking over the winter when our off season occurs.
Yeah. So you do have, you don't close. Do you close? You're not open year round.
So historically, it's been May through the end of December,
Yeah.
Closed January through April. And the main reason for that is traffic, as well as the fact that this building is very old and very expensive to heat, and it is very cold. So those are some of the challenges that we face to think about. We would absolutely love to be open all year. But from an economic, you know, playing with the numbers, when does that make sense for us? You know, we have, you know, growth in the community, and we're so excited to have the resort and the lodge right down the road open over the course of the last few weekends. So I think we'll continue to see maybe what that all year round, you know, demand is for the potential business and the investments to the building, what that could mean in order to be able to have an efficient building from a heating standpoint.
Yeah, great. Well, I'll ask you one last question, and then unless Steve and Victoria have additional comments, we'll thank you for taking time away from your business and move on to Russ at the credit union. But just before you leave us, what advice would you give? I mean, you know, most people on this call have a favorite business or may know people in their communities that have wanted to start businesses or expand businesses. And so what advice, you know, would you have for others who might be in the same position as you, either expanding in the future, you know, now you'll have a better sense, I would imagine, as you look to expand or renovate the building in the future. What advice would you give folks looking to access capital?
Yeah.
I mean, I could chime in there.
Go ahead,
I mean,
yeah.
the simplest answer I think would be really just to talk to people, right? Like if you were to reach out to Steve or, you know, somebody from a local organization, if they don't have an answer for you, they have somebody who does. You know, and I think part of the comfort of working with somebody local like this is, you know, the confidence that you gain from having those local resources and connections, you know, and being able to ask that advice, right? I mean, for us, we had a pretty decent sense of, you know, maybe what we wanted to do with the space and what our plans for the future are, but you know, those resources exist to help with, you know, planning for the future for things look just like that. So I would just say, you know, don't be shy, speak up. That's what folks are here for.
Yeah, community is really strong. And something that I think we continue to learn, especially as we even own the business, how many connections we can make and how open-armed, you know, so many people in the community are to see a business thrive, right? To see something continue to stay as a cornerstone of the community. So yeah.
Nobody wants to see you fail.
No.
Great. No, they don't. And now we all know where to go in Schroon Lake. So that's good. If nobody knew before. So Victoria and Steve, are you okay if we move on and introduce Russ, or did you want to add anything to close?
I would just add in that the Raglins have been a pleasure for us to work with. They're a fantastic story. I mean, the stuff that we do is, you know, we know it's important, but it's heartwarming too, and it's really cool to see them fill this great niche so competently in this community. So we love it. Thank you.
Thank you. Great.
You know, thank you, Ryan and Amanda. I really appreciate your presence here today. You know, I'm truly looking forward to that next iteration of the town store. So you've got some great ideas, and I can't wait for you to, you know, make those materialize. So thank you.
Thank
you.
you. Hear about you guys.
Thanks so much. All right, so we'll move on to another important mission-based financial institution in the region and expert in the region, Russ Cronin. Russ is, or I won't say I suppose you could be an institution yourself in the region, but I mean, Russ is president and CEO of Adirondack Regional Federal Credit Union, and he moved to the Adirondacks in 2014 as the chief financial officer for St. Joseph's in Saranac Lake. He's been in the banking industry for 40 years, including 30 years in consumer and commercial banking and 15 years in corporate finance. I will have to also mention that he did a stint as Adirondack Foundation CFO before heading to the credit union. So I've heard Russ say more than once, a little empathy goes a long way. Perhaps that's why I know him to be an analytic finance guy. He's been so successful in the business of mission-based lending. So Russ, over to you.
Sure, thank you. So Lori asked me to just talk a little bit about what the credit union is. I think a lot of folks don't understand credit unions and the difference between banks and credit unions. We are a federal credit union, so we're chartered under the United States government. That gives us a nonprofit status of 501c1 versus the normal 501c3 that you see in the public sector. Because we are a government agency. What credit unions are member-owned cooperatives, basically. So our members deposit using our full service financial institution capabilities. They deposit funds with us. Those funds are then turned around and used as funds to lend back into the communities. And so it's very secular. We are able to get grants through a couple different sources, and we're able to receive grants privately as well. You know, those grants basically fall right to our bottom line, which you know, in nonprofit land, everybody understands is your net worth. Our regulators, NCUA, National Credit Union Administration, we do have net worth ratios that are like capital ratios of corporations, and we need to maintain a net worth ratio of greater than 7% to be well capitalized and continue our lending activity. Our deposits are federally insured by NCUA's insurance fund. It is separate from the FDIC insurance fund. It's capitalized entirely by credit unions. And our operating geography is Franklin, Essex, Clinton, and St. Lawrence counties. In St. Lawrence County, we really are in the underserved markets of St. Lawrence County. So think of 30 miles south of Ogdensburg, and that's really where our geography works. As a community credit union, NCUA looks for us to be able to show that the services of the communities that we're supporting are largely the same types of services. So, where do people go to get social safety net services? Where do people go to get their news? And there's got to be a tight link between the communities you're serving and those types of services that they're getting elsewhere. Well, I'm not sure why it's not paging down. There we go. So why do credit unions exist? The missions of credit unions is really to strengthen communities by ensuring that there's equitable financial inclusion. So this is much the same as the mission of the CDFI, which AEDC represents us in our area. I think NCUA, like a lot of federal agencies, recognize that financial services aren't equitable, especially in underserved communities and specifically in rural areas. There are a couple different designations that support that at NCUA. There's a low income credit union designation. Unfortunately, here in the North Country, none of us are able to get that low income designation, which has some financial benefits for us at the government level with receiving grant funding from various sources. The problem with it is the amount of government and municipal employment and the employment rates of the teachers in our area, the Sunmounts of our area, the federal penitentiaries and the state penitentiaries. It drives the median income up of the entire area. And so when you look across the North Country, we don't really ever meet the definition of low income, which means 50% of the population has to be living below the poverty rate. We all see those that live below the poverty rate every day. Unfortunately, there is another cog in the wrench there that is that's keeping us from being able to get additional services to help those folks. We try at Adirondack Regional Federal Credit Union to execute on this mission of financial inclusion by making credit available to those who can't obtain it anywhere else. Or if they are even able to obtain it somewhere else, they feel that there's a benefit to working with a local organization who understands the local needs, understands the communities that we work in and the challenges in each of those communities. And so we're very proud of being part of those communities and working at that level. And I think, the real benefit to working with the credit union is versus a traditional bank, and I think you heard this from Steve when he was talking about some of the challenges with the business in Schroon Lake. We sit down and we try and get to know the individual as an individual. Yes, they're possibly going to become a business owner or already a business owner, but fundamentally, they're people first, right? And the business is just an extension of their personal identity. And so we work with them to try and find a way to get to a yes versus starting with a no. I mean, we always start with we're going to get to being able to say yes. And so these are the things that we need to do. And I think as you heard from AEDC, those things aren't any different than what a traditional bank would look for. I mean, we look for business plans and we look for financial projections and we look for management having an understanding of the business that they're getting into, at a level that's going to let them be successful in running that business. So it's all the things that a traditional financial institution looks at. The difference is that we are mission-based meaning our communities are stronger when there's capital available to support these businesses, to grow them or transition them or assist them in wherever they are. I think Steve said it best, meeting them where they are. Lori also had asked me to just highlight some of the businesses that we've assisted in the past. This is just a short list. I mean, I could give you probably a page of businesses, but Northern Lights School acquired an elementary school that was over in Saranac Lake. We helped them with their business acquisition loan. This presented some unique challenges in that Northern Lights School, as many of you are aware, is a nonprofit. And nonprofits traditionally have struggles getting financing through a commercial financial institution, largely because boards of nonprofits are really the overseers of the public funds that are being funneled into the nonprofit to do the good work that they do. And board members don't like to give personal guarantees, and banks don't like to lend without a personal guarantee in the business space. So it's one of the ways that we can be helpful. We've had a couple different nonprofits reach out to us that we've been actively working with. So I think you'll see more lending in the nonprofit sector through the credit union in the future. We helped Earth Girl Design with a building acquisition. This was part of their DRI grant here in Tupper Lake. They could not wait for the DRI funds to start getting themselves back up and running. So we helped them acquire the building, and we helped them do the financing for some of the renovations that needed to be done. Lori?
Russ, what's DRI? Downtown
Revitalization. Is
initiative.
or
And it's,
initiatives?
and it's funds that are coming from the state. So it's
Yeah.
the ability to leverage and take advantage of those funds.
Yeah, Saranac Lake a couple years ago got 15 million. Tupper Lake just recently got 10 million. And I think Malone got either 15 or 20 million as well. So there's been quite a bit in Franklin County. Plattsburgh also has a DRI grant program being run for their downtown revitalizations. We just helped with the business transition of the Adirondack Hotel in Long Lake. Again, this, as Steve mentioned, this has quite a bit of challenge to it because of the goodwill. Again, one of the things that the credit union can be helpful with is looking past the size of the goodwill and just the fact that the business economics are there to support the repayment of the loan, and that there are enough assets there, should we run into a problem and have to have a situation of a liquidation, that we could handle minimizing the losses that we would take. We also helped here in Tupper Lake with the transition of Ray's Liquor Store. This has been a couple of years ago. The business is hugely successful. The entire building's been renovated. And the new business owners have run it under the same, pretty much under the same model as the previous owner. Again, that had quite a bit of goodwill involved in the transition, and would have created some challenges for a conventional lender. Again, business transition with the goodwill challenges. We just helped Bare Essentials, Greg Moore over in Saranac Lake, transition his business to Christina Carl. That occurred in early March of this year. So she's up and running and getting her feet wet for the summer as a business owner, not an employee. The Saranac Lake DRI program, we worked with Bitter and Bones over there to acquire, to provide the working capital for them to acquire the brewing equipment. They started a small batch brewery in the building, and that was part of their DRI grant. So again, a lot of commercial banks won't lend against the grant itself. We were lending to help them with their capital purchase of the equipment, but they also needed funds to build out the entire plan that was submitted to the DRI program for them to qualify to get the 50% funding back. And then we just recently worked with, and Lori had a picture in her slides of With Women Wellness business over in Lake Placid. It's a midwifery business. It's a startup, and we provided the startup funding for some of the purchase of the equipment that she needed to start the midwifery service, and small working capital loans so that she could feel as though she could get through the start of the insurance payment cycles. And that went really well. And I think her business is now up and running, and it's kind of a family-owned business. Her mother works for her as well, providing mental health services to women. So it's really a woman-focused business, and part of something that we value here in our communities is supporting the well-being of our community members. Lori, that's all I had, so I'll stop sharing.
Great. And we're glad, I put a note to answer, John asked a moment ago about one of the other, about the Schroon Lake business. And so I answered also in here that the reason we had the picture of With Women Wellness is that was also the first loan from the credit union that was capitalized by a loan from the foundation. So yeah, so I'm going to move on. I know you all do have questions, but nobody else is leaving. We're making them stay until the end for questions. So hang on for questions for Russ, and I will bring in Danny Delaney from ANCA. And ANCA, I think I mentioned at the beginning that some were lenders of capital, so AEDC and the credit union, and that all provide the technical assistance that we've been talking about, kind of the support in getting to a business plan and a plethora of other things for these business owners. And Danny and ANCA fall in that space. So Danny is, and I think I have this right, Danny is ANCA's now entrepreneurial program director. Originally from Southern Vermont before coming to ANCA, she was the director of programs and events at a Chamber of Commerce in Boston's Metro West. And then prior to taking on the current role and title, Danny served as ANCA's business transition program coordinator. So Russ mentioned businesses in transition. It's a really important group in the North Country. And in that role, she coordinated partners and programs for the North Country Center for Businesses in Transition. And she serves currently as the president of the board of directors at the Saranac Lake Chamber of Commerce. So Danny, take it away.
Hey, thank you so much, everybody. Thanks so much to the Adirondack Foundation for having me today and talking a little bit about our work. I'm going to share some slides just about ANCA. ANCA has been around since 1955. I had the distinct pleasure of not having to make a map slide because Victoria's map slide covered our region too. So thank you so much, Victoria, for doing my legwork for me. But we also serve that same 14 county footprint and work really closely with the AEDC and other partners. Our vision is a new economy that works for all, and we are trying to help build prosperity across Northern New York to create and sustain wealth and value in our local communities. We work in a couple different program areas. That's on the next slide, just to kind of show you a little bit our swath of things that we do. So we work with small businesses. I'll be talking mostly about that today. Food systems, so looking at the local food system as a whole, building its strength and stability for small farms and food producers. We work in clean energy, connecting residents, businesses, and communities with clean energy and energy efficient opportunities. Equity and inclusion, we're the home of the Adirondack Diversity Initiative to center diversity, equity, and inclusion, belonging in all of our work. And right now, and just kind of important for this conversation, we also sort of have the Center for Business Pandemic Response, which helps to provide some of our partners and ourselves with additional funding for technical support that we, right after the pandemic, to help make sure that folks are getting, who have small businesses, are getting access to the supports that they need to stabilize after that hardship. So the reason I'm on this call today is because I have been the program manager for a number of years now, over 5, for the Center for Businesses in Transition, which was originally funded by the Northern Border Regional Commission. And it is a program that I manage. I am not the Center for Business in Transition. all of these people are. So we focus on a network of economic development organizations, IDAs, lenders, folks who are helping small businesses in our region think about transitioning and moving to their next phase, developing joint resources to help businesses who want to transition to new ownership through an employee, whether they want to sell on the open market, maybe they want to turn into a worker-owned cooperative like Ward Lumber, or some other examples as well. But whatever the business owner kind of wants to think about and how they want to transition their business, help them think through that plan and plan early for it. And our goal is, we work with some small business owners to do this, but our goal is to really help all of these other organizations with the SBDC and AEDC to build their toolboxes up about how they can speak to their clients, their members, their community members about how important to have these succession planning conversations early and often, ways to have them, how you can support the folks and businesses in your community from closing their doors, and to make sure that they can keep them open. So we've been doing this for a little while. We did the next slide. There's kind of a little bit of a quick overview that you can't read. There's too many things on the slide. But it says, we've worked with over 218 business owners. We've had 37 successful business transitions throughout the region. And on that next slide, there's some pictures of some of the ones that have transitioned. You'll notice that some of them are one-person shops, the Main Street Exchange in Saranac Lake. There's no bank involved with that. It was it's owner financed. That happens a lot. Most transitions have some sort of owner financing, both nationally and within the portfolio of folks that we work with. Some of them have patient and capital financing from our partners here that we've been working with. Some of them are really unique transitions, like Ward Lumber, where now 55 plus people own Ward Lumber. Jay Ward is the acting CEO for now, but they're looking for a new CEO, but now it's a worker-owned cooperative. So we bring in resources. We collectively create new resources. We have 47, I think, videos all on tap if somebody wants to know the ins and outs of taking over a business. We do matchmaking events. Right now we have a familiarization tour program available. So if you know somebody who wants to take over a business that doesn't live near it and wants to come visit, we can help pay to have them come and visit that business. So it's more sort of the ecosystem infrastructure to help folks in their communities bring up these issues, talk to business owners in a sensitive way, and then connect them to people like Russ and connect them to people like Steve and Victoria, and ensure that they know what is available to help them as they make this big life choice. So that's what kind of we do at the Center for Businesses in Transition. And, it's really getting to those questions like, it usually takes 3 to 5 years to transition a business. How, why should you start thinking ahead that far in advance? And what are the things that you need to get ready? What are the steps of the business transition? And why would you consider owner financing? And trying to get some of those low-hanging fruit questions answered so that folks in our communities have the resources they need to make these big decisions.
Great. Good. Thanks, Danny. Good. So thank you. All of our panelists will thank you multiple times again for taking the time for the conversation, but we'll turn to everybody in the audience for questions, and I'll tap dance for a second while you think of your questions. But because I mentioned before, right? Everybody has favorite businesses or just businesses they frequent locally on this call, and probably known owners during a time when they struggled or wanted to expand. And so these are, you can tell, Amanda and Ryan, or I think Ryan mentioned, just going to talk to people locally. These are kind of the local boots on the ground experts. These are the local people, hopefully, that they're going to talk to when they need help. So they're at least some of the folks to ask about the health of the region and our businesses. So opening it up, I have many questions, but I'd rather open it up to you all for thoughts. And you can raise your Zoom hand if you want. We're going to keep an eye out for that, or just unmute and ask a question. Oh, whoops, hang on. And thank you, Callie. everybody, so the first question in here is how, if all of you could actually answer, how is our region different for small businesses than other parts of New York State or the country?
I'll start, and I'm sure other folks have opinions on this as well, but I think that, you know, some of the reasons why we're so blessed are geographic broadness and, you know, the rural nature that we're in. I mean, I find it always kind of amazing that ANCA and ADC cover 14 counties, and a lot of communities that would, you know, be many millions of populations, and it's just about like 1.1 million. So the fact that our geography is so broad, I think, presents some real challenges in itself, and the lack of, you know, accepting a sprinkle of metropolitan or micropolitan areas. We don't have the services and the connections and often critical mass, I think, for making it easy for businesses to do the things they need to do. And I think it does require a lot more of the nonprofit foundations extra work to fill in those gaps. Another thing that I think is a challenge, or that in larger communities there are a lot more depth to staffing at the public sector. So you have cities, towns, and villages that have whole departments that are pro-business, pro-development, and where people go typically to do these things. And even our bigger communities have very small staffs. They're incredible. They do a really good job, but they're very small. So having partners, the nonprofit, the credit union partners, and the foundation support to provide those gaps, I think is absolutely critical, because otherwise it would be very hard to get anything done.
Victoria. Danny, Russ, Steve?
Yeah, I would say from operating a business perspective, I mean, the fact that we are so seasonally tourist-based businesses, I think it creates a challenge when somebody is looking at that loan payment that they're going to have to be making through the winter months. And so, you know, there are some unique things that we do here in the North Country, or at least here at Adirondack Regional Federal Credit Union. We structure loans so that there's a amount of principal being paid when the money's being made throughout the spring and summer months. And in the winter months, when it's slowest for our businesses, we let them make just interest payments to keep their loans current. It seems to be a really good model. It seems to be something that that helps a lot of businesses see their way through the financial obligations that they're signing up for, and knowing that you know, that there's ways that they can then approach us for additional cash flow needs that happen during those seasonal low times for businesses.
Danny, anything to add?
Gosh, those were such good answers.
They were. They were pretty comprehensive.
I'll add a
I have
really
a question. Oh, sorry.
Great.
I have a question for Russ. That list you showed of loans that you had made didn't seem particularly touristy to me. They seem to be the kind, like the liquor store runs 12 months a year, and so does the midwifery place, I guess. And I mean, they don't certainly close for the winter. So are you finding that it's easier to lend to people that are in non-touristy businesses than touristy businesses?
No, Joe, not at all. I mean, like I said, I just put together a short list. You know, Earth Girl Designs, I would tell you, they probably are one of those businesses that is more seasonally based in the spring, summer, and fall months. You know, she does have a large online presence as well that I think helps carry her through the winter, but 70% of her income comes from the summer months and the tourist season. The Adirondack Hotel is kind of the same way. They in the winter, they do have a little bit more of a winter business if the lakes freeze early enough for the snowmobiles to get to the hotel. Bitters and Bones, I would say, is the same way. I mean, they operate year round, but probably 70% of their cash flow is seasonal cash flow.
So you might all, and I don't know whether I'll put this, it's probably two questions in one, right? So what are the common misconceptions about people or business owners, you know, who are struggling for capital? And I guess the other way around, what are common misconceptions that the business owners have themselves, right, when they're trying to access capital?
I'd be happy to start that one. In terms of common perceptions, I think that one thing we have to, the folks that we're helping, that we have to get over the common misperception that just because a starting out business owner may not have sufficient capital to begin their business plan and not be bankable or fully bankable, it doesn't mean that they've done poor planning. It doesn't mean that, that they, have been lazy in some sense, that they didn't do the things that they should have done. There's so many barriers, whether it's, race or class or age, and just the very different shifting economics of the place that we're in now. There's so many reasons why there are barriers and why folks do need a help to get started that it would be almost impossible to list them all. But I think that's a misconception, that people have to get over that for sure.
I'll jump onto that, Victoria. I think those are some great points. A couple of misconceptions that we hear a lot when it comes to businesses and transition specifically are that most transitions don't require owner financing and that the owner can just sell it outright. Most of the time, the owner has to do some sort of owner financing. And sometimes that's for goodwill, sometimes it's for some of those different harder to finance pieces, but it is usually part of the package. So that's a misconception we hear a lot, that we do a lot of education and training around right away. And that's not just for our region, that's a national issue for small businesses. And sometimes it can be really beneficial for the small business owner to do owner financing. And sometimes, there are barriers to that too, but that's definitely a part of the package. And the other thing I would say is we hear a lot from business owners, and you'll see in grant applications or other places that really focused on growth. How many new employees are you going to get? Are you going to add an addition on? Are you going to get this new thing or this bigger thing or add a new line? Most of our small business owners, and we typically work with small business owners that are 1 to 5 employees, sort of in the micro business, both across business technical services and the CBIT program, are really less focused on growth than they are stability. How do they retain the employees that they have? How do they keep their doors open? How do they get to a place with the aid of someone like ADC or the Adirondack Credit Union? How do they get to a place where their cash flow looks good for a couple of years so they can think about that? How do they cover their heating bills? So really thinking about that stability piece as a way in which we can invest in our communities and our small businesses.
Great. Scotty, did I see you?
Yeah, Lori, I just wanted to ask a general question about the landscape out there for demand for capital. There's obviously a lot of pressure been put on regional banks recently. Has it made it more difficult because the regional banks are probably not playing the way they were probably prior to the failure of SVB and some of the others?
Steve or Russ, you want to answer that? I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I think it was always a challenge. We knew and we've seen our clients struggle, even some of the folks who have pretty good credit and, good projects, solid projects. Banks, traditional banks don't typically want to do startup projects that, unless there's a lot of cash involved or something with very high collateral. So that's always been there, but the dynamics have changed even considerably more so that projects, and Steve or Russ, you can speak to this, that, probably would have been of interest or are of a scale enough that might have been interest to a commercial bank 3, 4, or 5 years ago or not anymore. And so, you have to have access for the projects. Otherwise, they're not going to happen in our communities.
Just highlights the importance of all the work that you all are doing here, though, with the regional banks not being able to participate as well. Russ, I'd be curious what you have to say about that.
Yeah, no, I think that, financial institutions in general, and it's not just regional commercial banks.
Right.
The larger banks are really doing a lot to basically garner the deposit base of our communities, right? I mean, you've got Capital One throwing an 11-month 5.5% CD out there.
Yeah.
Our banks and our local financial institutions aren't going to be able to compete in that type of environment. It's just, their earnings aren't as strong. We build our earnings in hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, not billions of dollars a year. So the liquidity issue is a big issue, I think, in the financial institutions in general. And so I think it makes all of us be a little bit more diligent with the lending activities that we're doing. But I do think the community-based organizations have a better ability to continue doing that lending in light of these liquidity issues, just because they tend to be a little bit more capitalized. Most credit unions, net worth ratio is 12% or greater. So, their capital base is a little bit stronger. And in this type of market where you can get a little bit more interest for the risk that you're taking, you certainly can let your investment portfolio run off and generate the cash that you need for lending activities, which is what we're doing here at the credit union right now.
Right. Thank you.
I'd like to say is I don't think that there is any shortage of demand for funds. I think the real challenge, at least for AEDC, comes with capacity. And I say that because, in my experience, with the typical type of client that we have that may need some technical assistance, business plan assistance, and some early handholding, it really does take just as much time to fund a $20,000 loan as it does a $100,000 loan. Okay. And we understand the importance of those $20,000 loans. We are not necessarily an organization that's focused on the bottom line. As a mission-driven organization, we hold just as much importance to those micro loans that we do as we do towards the larger loans that we can do. I think more than anything, that's our greatest challenge.
Mm-hmm. Good. Well, and so that speaks a little bit to the gap. So you guys are really involved in, partnerships of putting the capital together for these, often of putting the capital together from multiple sources for these businesses. So what are the missing pieces? What gaps it kind of exist in this ecosystem of organizations helping support small businesses to have what we need, the robust menu, so to speak, of support for our small businesses. Danny, were you?
Yeah, I'll jump in.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll jump in with something pretty specific on that. And this is something Victoria and I talk about quite a bit. And that the partnership is really identified. Even if the right person, maybe it's an employee who's worked at a business for 10 years, is able to get financing to take over a business, and they know everything about the business, they worked on their credit, they worked with Steve, they're ready to go. Trying to come up with that 20% down payment to take over that business, to complete the deal and just kind of finalize that full package for many of the individuals that we work with could be a lot of money, and is a lot of money for folks to overcome as a barrier. So it's not always 20% down, but that's kind of an average. And so that is one thing that we've been trying to sort of strategize and think about together as a collective, like how do we overcome that barrier, especially for our, minoritized or underserved populations for whom we want to make sure have the most access to being able to take over and keep our businesses open.
Great. Anything to add, Russ or Victoria? And Reg, I apologize. Did you have a hand? I think your camera's off now, but I think you
Camera's on.
There you go.
He's muted.
You're
Reg,
muted.
You're muted.
You're still muted. There we go. I may be able to. Let me unmute you. Hang on.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Let me unmute you. Nope.
There we go.
There we go.
Okay. I'm just curious, is there a general metric that, so for those who are giving loans or whatever, so in order to make 10 loans, how many potential customers, clients do you see before you choose your 10 loans? And then this is the hard part of the question for the second part. Out of those 10 loans that you make, what is your success rate?
Boy, Reg, that's a really great question. You know, a couple years ago, we had done some type of a measurement like that, and if I remember correctly, I think it went something like this: out of 80 inquiries, 10 of those 80 inquiries actually resulted in a loan application. Out of those 10 loan applications, we got 2 loans out of that. So, you know, it's a lot of work to get 2 loans, and those loans, you know, might have been $5,000 and a $15,000 loan. So there's an awful lot of effort to get just a couple loans sometimes. But it really, that's I don't think that's the point. You know, that I don't think that's the point. The size of the loan, it really doesn't matter. When we have that initial conversation with the client, we find out what their goals and objectives are. And by that is what we use as the metric for success. For instance, there was a young lady, lived in Lake Placid. She was discovered when she was selling some cupcakes on Lake Flower Ave. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And one of our staff stopped by, introduced ourselves, and said, boy, we really like your cupcakes. You know, we're AEDC, you know, if you're thinking of expanding or you need money to grow, we're here to help. Well, this young lady actually came to AEDC and said, you know, I do make some really great cupcakes and I get a lot of good feedback. I think that there's a business to be had in here. So we took her in and we helped her develop a business plan. We actually helped her find a location in Lake Placid. But the really cool thing about this is she was comfortable with very small, what I consider relatively small profit. And it was intentional. Okay. Oftentimes we think of a business being successful, you make lots and lots of money. But for this particular individual, that wasn't the case. This person felt it was much more important to have control over her time, control over the decisions that she makes, what kind of products that she makes, and to whom she can sell them for. That was more of a consideration rather than making lots and lots of money. In fact, this young lady was quite frugal, and she could make ends meet and be totally happy with $12,000 net profit a year. Now, we still granted the loan, even though we considered that income to be, you know, sub-poverty. However, her living expenses were very, very low. And she was quite adept and comfortable living at that income level. So for AEDC, that was a successful business. So it really does depend. Yeah.
And I would add in on that as well. I think you were asking how many of the businesses that we've worked with over the years typically don't make it and fail, that we have to charge off. It's typically over a long period of time, less than 5% for us, because
less than that, less than that.
It has been that high and a little higher. More recent years were like 2 to 3%. So it's a small number because we are responsible for paying it back. So we have to be careful stewards, although we want to make every small business have every opportunity. So it's quite small. That I probably would stop there, but I would say that you see some public fund revolving loan programs that have quite a bit higher default rates. you know, that's kind of maybe the beauty of a nonprofit that's a mission-based lender, but ultimately has to be responsible to, you know, make sure that its resources are solid.
Russ, did you want to answer the same question or?
And I would say the same thing that Steve said. It's really, you know, I measure success based on our ability to help the business accomplish the goals that the business is trying to accomplish through the financing structure. It's a little bit different, I think, answering the question of how many loans do I see that don't, or how many members do I see that don't become loans? I mean, typically by the time somebody walks in to the bank, they're really committed to going down this path, and they're really trying to get the financing that they need to accomplish their business objectives. I mean, I would tell you that there are times when I've sat down and actually helped somebody do their business plan because we need a business plan for our file. I think that that's one of the differences in working with a nonprofit business like us or AEDC is you do get that individualized support that you wouldn't necessarily get from a commercial financer. But yes, I mean, so, you know, most of the times the folks that come in end up materializing as a loan on our books, Reg, and then we measure the success on, you know, the business achieving the goals that they were hoping to achieve.
So we want to make sure that we meet our objective of getting you out on time, of hoping you learned something and learn something new and understand these organizations better, but make sure you get out on time. And Russ, you just answered probably I was going to ask a last question of how you do, since you are all nonprofits and are used to answering the question, how you do measure success. So if maybe we can hear from Danny and Victoria as we kind of wrap up comments from you all. Either one. Go ahead, Danny.
Yeah, we measure success by the number of business owners who have a succession plan in place. And that doesn't mean that they have transitioned their business fully, but that they have thought about it and they are ready to make that leap and talk to people about their plans for the future.
So for our lending program, the successes are the businesses that open, and we also look at success who's still open years down the line and or has paid off their loans. So those are all measures of success. And for our client growth, it is also a success when our businesses, as they expand, don't need us anymore. You know, they grow up and they work with Russ, or then they move on to a commercial bank. That's great. That's good success for us.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, everybody who has been here. So everybody who joined us, thank you to the panelists for sharing your time and expertise. Frankly, everybody in the Hollywood Square, my 2 pages of Hollywood Squares here has, thank you for being so thoughtful with your questions and your time. We'll have an exciting announcement, hopefully later this month, about our work with the AEDC, but we started with comments on impact investing, place-based impact investments, and we'll drop, Jen, if you don't mind, a link to the recent newsletter in here, so you can read more about the transportation project I mentioned earlier. With Women Wellness is profiled in there, and housing. So thank you, everybody, from my end. And Leslie, do you mind wrapping us up?
There we go. Sure thing. For those of you still here, thank you. We're grateful you took the time to be with us today to provide knowledge, to gain new knowledge. For our fund holders and donors, we thank you for your support, past and present. And for those who are new to the foundation or the topic, we hope you'll become more involved. You can do so by reading more in our newsletter, ask questions, and understand the place-based investment work of the foundation, continuing to learn about and support our regional mission-based nonprofit lenders. Perhaps not only patronizing local businesses, but get to know the owners. They need expertise, they need partnerships, and sometimes capital. Lastly, we will send a follow-up email with contact information for our panelists, a few prompts for feedback, and the link for the recording. Please take a moment to respond, as the feedback is always helpful. On behalf of Lori and me and the entire team at Adirondack Foundation, we thank you once again, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.